sustain business growth across generation.
To inspire, influence, and connect family businesses and professionals.
The concept of family business has evolved, has been studied, has been sparked.
Welcome to Fambiz TV, brought to you by Premier Family Business Consulting, where our objective is to unite families in business. This is our second episode, and last time we discussed about what is family business consulting. Today, our topic is very interesting. It's about how do families survive until after the third generation. There's this thing called the third generation curse. Our guests for today are the following. Of course, we have to my far left the Chief Operations Officer and the Executive Director for Consulting Practice, Neil Montesclaros. Hello, Neil.
Maayong adlaw.
Glad to have you back. And we have Maria Teresa Ramos. She's a senior consultant and head of family strategy of Premier Family Business Consulting. Hello, Tere.
Yes. Hi, Carol.
Okay, so very interesting topic.
Yes.
All right. So how do families survive the third generation curse? Before we even ask how they survive it, just exactly what is the third generation curse? Who would like to answer that? Neil or Tere?
Well, the third generation curse is really coming from the famous Chinese saying on the first generation builds the wealth, the second generation grows the wealth, and the third generation squanders it. Some would say that's a bit pessimistic, but that kind of thinking has also been is also a common thinking around the world.
Is that a fact though?
Well, if you go to, for example, in Spain, they have a saying that says, parang bodeguero, padre bodeguero, hijo millonario, and then nieto the apo por diosero. So that's
Okay.
that's Spanish, and then they also have a very succinct saying in Germany, no, which in English means build, create, and then destroy. So all over the world, the idea of the third generation curse is very prominent. It's shared, right?
So there must be some truth to it because of all of these sayings that have
Parang
been
folk sayings.
exactly,
right?
exactly. So like when there's smoke, there's fire. Okay, can you give us a little bit more of information in terms of families in the global scale who have surpassed? You can give us statistics
Right.
or families to be exact who have survived after the third generation.
Adding to what Teresa has mentioned already, it is a global observation. Now, it's difficult for family businesses to go beyond the third. So that's the third generation course. It's
Yeah.
an observation. It's like a phenomenon. However, when we put, actual empirical studies into it, and they did, and they realized that less than half, more or less 30 to 40%, can successfully transition from first to the second generation. Okay? And then from the second generation, transitioning to the third generation, that would be another 30, 40%.
And this is statistics.
Statistics
Right, okay.
already. There have been different studies, so they might vary in terms of exactness. Pero let's give a ballpark figure. So around 30 to 40 manages from first to second, and another 30 na lang yun, probably managing from second
Second.
generation to the third. Now, from third generation going to the
Fourth
fourth,
generation.
that would be around 12 to 15%. So
Correct.
you see the difference. No, medyo sayon madali pa, or it's easier from first to second. But when you're looking at second to third, still okay. But third to fourth, then the numbers become there's a big difference. The numbers become the percentile. There's less transitioning well from third to fourth. So that's the third generation curse.
Okay.
That's why they call it, it's a curse
Okay.
Basta dumating na kayo sa third generation, well, it's gonna be very difficult.
Mm.
Now, yet, well, let us say majority seems to be, experiencing this. Not all.
Yes.
So let's talk about those
Who
10
have
to-
survived.
Yeah, the 10 to 15% who
Yes.
actually went beyond the third.
Right.
So examples of these family businesses is as old as 500 AD. That's a Japanese construction firm.
Mhm.
And another one is a hotel or hostel, also in Japan in 700 AD.
Mhm.
And then if you're talking of the wineries and the glass making
Right.
craft in Italy,
Mhm.
is in the first century AD.
Oh.
And they're still around.
Okay.
They're still around. In fact, yung Japanese na family business is already in their 46th generation
Wow.
to date.
Mm.
To date. Let's talk about medyo sikat, something well known.
Okay.
Faber-Castell
Mhm.
Okay.
is in the 1800s.
Wow.
Mm.
And until now, they're still
Yeah.
existing.
Do you drink?
Oh, well, social drinking, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Cuervo
Okay. Oh,
is in the 1700s.
okay.
Mexican yan.
All right.
Okay. And our guest,
Yeah. Last year,
last year, Cordonnier.
Raventos Cordonu,
Yes.
they are the makers of cava. That's a famous kind of wine
Uh-huh.
that you can only find in Spain,
Okay.
cava. Their founders, parang mga second gen or third gen, founded that kind of wine. And they're at the 17th,
Wow.
17th to 18th
Generation. They're founded a
generation.
little bit later than when Magellan discovered us. They started in 1551.
Wow.
Winery. And they're still around.
Right.
As you mentioned, one of their grandchildren or grandchild was one of our speakers in a
Yes.
conference.
Yes.
So that's Borja, Mr.
Yeah.
Borja. And if you want some more popular brand yun, Colgate,
Mhm.
1800s. Victorinox, the Swiss knife,
Uh-huh.
1800s.
Wow.
General Electric,
Mm.
early part of the 19th century.
Right.
Then Ford.
So basically, the big global brands that are still here, most of them are family businesses
Yes.
that
Family,
have served
family origin.
origin,
Right.
that have survived the third generation curse.
Yeah.
What would be the secrets then of these surviving family businesses?
You might want to give some ideas.
Right. The parang secrets of longevity.
Yes, yes.
We find that with mostly in Japan,
Uh-huh.
right? Because a number of long-lived family firms or family businesses are concentrated in Japan.
In Japan.
So there are a number of researchers who have really focused on what are these old they call them centennial centennial family businesses in Japan doing to sustain that long.
Right.
And one of these researchers is Professor Toshio Goto. We also invited him in during the last Family Enterprise Excellence Conference, and he spoke about his study. And what came out of his study is that there are 7 key factors for longevity.
All right. Please
Right.
narrate
So
them.
very quickly, he said that first is the Japanese family businesses have a long-term view.
Mhm.
They're gung ho on sustaining their family business. So that's they don't actually go for profit. They'd rather profit for the long term. So
Mhm.
they can have short-term losses
Mhm.
just to make sure that they continue to create value over the long run.
So they look forward. They're
Yes.
visionaries. Okay.
Right. And then second, they have risk management,
Mhm.
right? So they don't haste to expand. They're quite conservative, but at the same time, they're very careful. As a matter of fact, one of the things Professor Tosho mentioned was about debt. You know, as much as possible, they don't highly leverage. These businesses don't leverage themselves on debt.
Mhm.
Okay, and then third, interesting enough, because this is also echoed by Jim Collins when he studied on good to great companies.
Mhm.
According to Toshio Goto, the third key factor for longevity is staying with your core strength.
Yeah.
So these
That sounds familiar.
these long-lived family firms are not spread. they have a core competency. Like one of my favorite Japanese brand is Kikoman, a Japanese food-based company which has been here for so long. So they have not, they have concentrated on food-based products.
Basically focusing on your strength.
Yes.
Okay.
And then fourth is trust. There's a lot of the kind of trust that the Japanese system has is not inclusive only of family, but it's also inclusive of community, of customers, of suppliers. So that trust system also contributes to the longevity of these family firms. And then they also have commitment. The commitment that they have in sustaining the family. Actually, they have what they call the inner house, the outer house, the main house. So the commitment to propagating the agenda, the values of the main house is very strong. And what's interesting with this key factors for longevity on the Japanese firms is that overall they see that there is altruism, and that they call this social capital, where all these Japanese firms are actually leveraging on their relationship with their customers, with their employees. So in a sense, they're saying that the reason why they stay long because they continue to create value, and that value is propagated because of the relationship that they have. So
Does culture also have something to do with it?
definitely
The way-
Culture of
culture of the
of the people.
of the people. Yeah, because we know that Japanese people they're very
Gotcha.
disciplined.
Yeah.
Loyal.
Loyal.
They're very loyal. So I guess that also contributed, right?
especially in the area of altruism,
Mm.
because it's a Zen culture in Japan
Mm.
that it's just part of their culture.
Right.
That they care for the environment, they care for people,
Mm.
and that's one of the insights that we have drawn from
Mhm.
Professor Tosho.
Tosho, yeah.
That altruism as a culture and practice in
Mm.
family business,
Mm.
I think, is a sustaining factor
Mm.
for families in business. But what's interesting is that's a Japanese study, right?
Yeah.
Facts and findings based on Japan. This is interesting because 98% of businesses in Japan are family owned.
All right. Okay.
And they are the number one country in the world
Mm.
that has the biggest concentration of family,
Family
business,
business.
that are century old.
Mm.
Okay, they based on that study, 25,000
Mm.
family firms
Wow.
in Japan
Mm.
are more than a century.
Mm.
US would come second, Germany would come third in terms of many long-lived family businesses.
Mm.
But besides Professor Tosho, we have John Ward
Mm.
in the 80s,
Mhm.
right, who did some
Mhm.
studies. And quite recently, one of our speakers also, si Dr. Dennis Jaffe,
Mm-hmm.
interviewed 100 global companies
Mhm.
who are more than a century old. He interviewed them.
Mhm.
And then he has his insights and finding. What's interesting, it aligns with what Professor
Yeah.
Tosho said
Mm.
and what John Ward did in the
Okay.
1980s. Quickly at the top of my head, one thing that was common, although they were independent studies,
Mhm.
John Ward focused on Illinois,
Yeah, Chicago.
Chicago. Dito naman with Dennis Jaffe, it's really global. It's global corporations, family owned. One thing they hit together,
Mm.
discovered it together. A shared purpose is very important.
Mm.
That's the long term of Professor Tosho. Dapat klaro sa pamilya that there's a long-term view.
We always hear of like, shared vision.
Shared
Yeah.
vision,
Purpose,
shared
yeah.
purpose.
Shared
Yes.
purpose.
Why are we in business together?
Right.
With all the
Mm.
difficulties, why are we doing it again?
Mm.
Yeah.
The other one is communication, which simply means that the generation continue to talk.
Mm.
They continue to
Mm.
dialogue.
Mm.
Let's engage.
Mm.
Let's have some interaction.
Mm-hmm.
These are the qualities that even Dennis Jaffe found surprising. Generation continue to exchange ideas and communicate.
Yeah.
The other one, there's a strong sense of family
Mm.
commitment. They are committed to family.
Mm. Yeah.
They really see that we are a family business and we're not sad about it. we're proud about this. And we're going to keep it like this. And we're going to be committed to keep this one as a family enterprise. And that's why they sustain themselves. The other one is more practical. The other two will be more practical. Communication. Because as we said, we cannot anticipate everything. But good communication, which includes conflict management, allows families and business to weather the storm. The other one, the last two pag yun, is parenting. Remember, the next generation can only be very good depending how they were brought up. So it's really both a responsibility of the leading generation. The good culture, the good values should be passed on to the next. And that's a function of parenting. So these are very practical discoveries na when you have good parenting, chances are succession will be better. The chances of succession is better. And the last one, after parenting is, by the way, you might ask, so Neil, Teresa, where did you get all this science? Where did this organized knowledge came about? Simply, they studied those who failed, and they studied those who succeeded.
Right.
And then put them together. That's the science of family business, the best practice. Now, what they've observed of long-lived, centuries-old family businesses is they have a policy before the need. They have a written rule.
Of course.
In John Ward's term, it's very important for family businesses, and because we have learned it from those who made it, you should have policies before the need. It can be called family agreement, it can be called family protocol, it can be called family constitution, which is the buzzword in the Philippines. You know, whatever it is, as long as it is a set of rules the family commits and abides with. That's essentially, in a nutshell, with what Teresa said and what I shared, the best practices, factors
Right.
that will help them weather the storm.
I was just kind of thinking because it would, in the past, before the 19th century, when knowledge was, the growth of knowledge was kind of slow at that time, because basically knowledge really, boomed, really fast in the 20th century.
Yes.
1948, we didn't have color televisions yet.
Correct.
And we even haven't gone to the moon yet.
Correct.
But in less than 100 years, man has gone to the moon, and now we can talk to another person on the other side of the globe, see their faces,
Yeah.
which was unheard of in the 1940s. So that generational gap, isn't that also could be one of the factors of the breakage of family businesses? Because your first generation might not understand what the third generation grew up seeing.
Right, it's true. I
Yeah.
totally agree. That's why one of the challenges of family businesses is really managing family dynamics.
Yes.
And one of the aspects of managing family dynamics is really the generational curse
Right.
that's coming from the generation gap.
And from the
Right.
environment,
Yeah.
right, also.
You have let's say a retiring founder, a 70-year-old, who is probably born in the 1940s,
Right.
and then you have a
A third
a
generation.
third generation who is a millennial, for
who
example.
now uses the cell phone.
Right. So the ideas can be very different. Even the kind of a strategy, their appetite is also, there's a contrast there. So those are one of the challenges for family businesses. And many times they just throw in the towel and they just say, I don't want to be involved. Especially the younger generation, they would say, I don't want to be involved.
Yeah.
That's your business. Take
Yes.
care of it. So that's when you see that the commitment may now be waning, and the ownership, the psychological ownership to the legacy built is now also fading. So that all of that really contributes to the third generation curse. That's why it's very important that I really agree with a study on generative families, where they found that this was mentioned by Neil, that one of the qualities of these generative families or families who have really overcome the third generation curse is shared purpose. Mean to say, from the top generation, from the founder to the second to the third to the fourth, they have a common, agreed, aligned purpose and direction.
And shared purpose that is communicated across
Right.
the generations as well.
Mm.
You mentioned also earlier parenting. Could be good parenting or bad parenting because like it depends on how they look at it. Because like if I believe, for example, lang, I believe I'm a good parent. I protect my kids from the pains I went through. So
Right.
they're kind of very protective. But in
Yeah.
the end,
Yeah.
they're not teaching their children to do what they went through so that they could survive
Right.
the next, the next phase of the
Yes.
family business, right?
That's true, and that is actually the effect for families of wealth. That is that intention to protect the younger ones from any kind of hard
Of
work,
pain,
of pain,
yeah.
that the founders or the older generation have gone through. That is that has an unintended effect, and that effect is called entitlement. Right? So the younger generation, be it third generation or fourth generation, is now put in a system where they are entitled.
Yeah, they grew up
Because-
in wealth.
Right.
Yeah.
So poor dad but rich son. So
Exactly.
that's two different worlds.
And there are a lot of jokes about that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna walk because, good for you because your father is rich, but me, my father is poor.
Correct.
Like that, right?
Yeah. Oh.
Yes,
So,
correct.
so I guess it all boils down to learning the different reasons why family businesses failed and also what made family business succeed.
Right.
And, communicating this to the rest of the family businesses.
Right.
In the Philippines, how are we doing in terms of family businesses? Do you have statistics of on how many family businesses have surpassed, at least, let's not talk about the third generation, at least the second generation?
So third generation, even if I could name a few,
Okay.
those who are ika nga, basically went beyond the curse. So we have the Aboitis, of course. You have the Ayalas, of
Ayalas.
course. You have the Lopezes. You have the Aranetas, right? Now the Limtuacos, no? Winery. These are just a sample of families that have made it through beyond the third. But we all know, because of some historical, you mentioned about time frame, many of the businesses in the Philippines really began after the war.
Yeah.
So most of them are really in transition
Yeah.
right now.
In the 1940s.
Yes,
Right.
and I'll just go back a bit to what you said about generational thing, right? We are at exciting, interesting, and challenging times
Now.
for family
Yeah.
business,
Okay.
because there are 4 generations at work. Just for the past 2 years, Gen Z has entered the workforce.
Okay.
Gen Z are those who were born 1996.
Okay.
That's Gen Z. So in a family business right now, the baby boomers are still alive. A good number of them
In the Philippines.
in the Philippines. I'm Gen X, so the Gen X are here. The one in transition for leaders right now are
Millennials.
the millennials. They will lead in the next 5 to 10 years. Their successors are already working right now. The first batch of Gen Z are in the workforce. And believe me, they're not the same as the millennials. Similar, but not exactly the same. So that's exciting. Exciting. If they have the true digital natives are the Gen Z. They really grew up with swiping.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that you mentioned earlier about shared purpose and about the families having something that's written that they can follow.
Right.
Because the Aboiti says they do have that. And they're now on their 5th generation. The
Right.
leaders of the company now are the 5th generation
Yes.
family members. And basically,
Yeah.
next year they're going to be celebrating their 100 years
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
as a corporation. But they
Yeah.
started actually
Way back.
even before that,
Yes.
before they became a
Yes.
corporation. So it's interesting. So what advice can you give families out there who are watching right now, who are on the brink of turning over the reins of the family businesses to the 4th generation? Basically saying that we are now the 3rd generation. and we have these problems.
Mm.
So how do we successfully turn over the reins to the fourth generation?
Mhm.
Advice,
Right.
just quick.
I would say, as a rationale, is preparation follows success. So if there are family businesses who are really aspiring to turn over the reins of the portfolio of family businesses that they have to the next generation, it's best to start early. So how do you start? First is first on my mind is leadership succession. Really create the proper governance structure for decision making, because in transitioning the reins of a portfolio of family businesses, you're actually telling your younger generation that I'm not going to decide on these things anymore. You're going to decide. So that process of creating a mechanism how to decide, predictabilities, and also a mentoring, because entrepreneurship really in decision making is something that has to be mentored. So that mechanism in the family has to be present as an integral part of preparation.
Okay.
And then second, there has to be the family also has to look into the succession of ownership in terms of assets.
Okay.
A lot of our family businesses in the Philippines are already corporations, so they can now start to think about how do we ensure that our shares of stocks, for example, are passed down to our family, whether that's bloodline or relatives of affinity. So those are things that the family has to, ownership succession has to be one of the things that the family has to prepare ahead of time, even before something happens.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's also, for me, it's very integral to take care of each family branch. When you talk about transitioning, then usually you are now thinking of your children having their own family. So now you treat them like a family branch. How do you take care of the family branch? And not just the family branch, the family as a whole. How do you take care of the family? How do you continue that commitment? How do you create that shared purpose? So these are preparations that families can already begin. And I think that more than investment into infrastructure, because that's very easy for a family to spend on, because you see a building, you see infrastructure. But one of the most important investments that a family business can make is really investment on their family.
On the relationship.
Yes, on their relationship.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So these are the preparations that the family has to think about.
All right. Would you like to add, Neil?
Yes, Neil.
Just three to emphasize. I call it tech,
Okay.
TEC.
Okay.
First is they need to prepare the family members to work as a team.
Correct.
Team.
Collaboration is very important if you want to survive multi-generation. Because, and this can be a little bit controversial, autocratic decision making, unilateral decision making is a privilege and a prerogative of the founders. But once you go to the second, third, and so on and so forth,
Yes.
that will not work. It worked during the beginning, and it worked perfectly well. But once the ownership stake is broader, you need to work as a team. Next is, among the many things you educate the next generation, values,
Yeah.
culture. This is very important, and maybe it's another session just for this idea.
Okay.
They need to have what we call, but I will explain it simply, to pass on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
But that's what we call transgenerational entrepreneurship, meaning in the same way that the founder was entrepreneurial, the next generation
Should
must be entrepreneurial.
Okay.
The entrepreneurial spirit must be kept in the family, regardless what business they will get into. Then it will be a long-lived family business or family enterprise. The other one is to get all this to working together seamlessly. Communication is still very important.
Agree.
So tech.
Okay,
Right.
so-
And if I may add, I'd like to clarify something here, because a lot of our clients would say, I really like what you're proposing, but our problem is I don't like my family business industry. So I cannot see myself, for example, we have a client who is into construction. It's not
Very technical.
glamorous, it's dirty. So I don't, the millennials, for example, the Gen Z, they don't see themselves participating in that kind of industry. So what does longevity means? So I'd like to make it clear that when we say longevity, it's really not longevity of a core business. So it's not having one business for the rest of
Rest
the
of your
family's life,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But longevity is about long-term creation of value, meaning to say the family has the capacity to create value over the long term, whether it's in the hospitality industry, whether it's the construction industry, whether it's in tech industry, as long as the family continues to come together, to work together, own together, manage together, and create value for the community. That's the current thinking now on longevity. Because what would you rather, a long-lived business where who is not creating value, meaning nobody wants it to be long-lived anyway, or a business, an institution where there's so much value in it, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much value that they create. So that's the current thinking now of longevity, and this is also the kind of longevity that we want to support family businesses in.
Okay.
That so that the millennials, the Gen Zs, will no longer be pressured. I should join my family business, construction business, or retail business. Because as a matter of fact, when we consult with family businesses, we look at their strengths. What are your strengths? If your strength is in tech, and then you're entrepreneurial like your dad or your mom, why don't you create a business plan? So a lot of times family businesses, you would advise them to create a business incubator forum for their younger gen to propose businesses. So it means that from the one big business that they have, the core business,
They
they can expand
Right.
in hospitality or even
Right.
in other tech other industries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, we learned so much, and I'm pretty
True.
sure our viewers out there have learned a lot on how to survive the so-called third generation curse. But if you still want to talk to them, our two guests here, and to their other consultants, you can just easily call them, the Premier Family Business Consulting. A telephone number is 032 266 2831, or email them at info@premierfamilybusiness.com. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And to all of the family businesses who aspire to attract and develop the next generation of leaders, make sure that you give them a call, Premier Family Business Consulting, with the full services that they have to offer. This has been Carol for Family Biz TV, brought to you by Premier Family Business Consulting, one in uniting families in business.